So last week I made a video on how to find beta readers for a book you're working on and why beta readers are so important. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the list of questions that I send every beta reader whenever they beta read one of my books. This is kind of like a part 2 to that video, so I would go watch that video first, or if you already know what a beta reader is and why they're important, then stick around if you want to hear the kind of questions that I ask. The way that I approach working with beta readers is different than the way that I approach working with an editor. To me, a beta reader's only job is to give me feedback on the book as a reader. I'm not really looking for technical feedback or anything that an editor would give me, especially not like line level edits. All I want to know is whether somebody enjoyed the book and why they didn't, and what they were fangirling over, what they hated, what lost them, places they had to suspend disbelief, things like that. Like reactions that someone would have when picking up a book from the bookstore and reading it for enjoyment. Super quick before we get started, just in case you're wondering who I am and what gives me the authority to talk at all about this. My name is Claire Freeze, and I'm an award-winning author who has published a 5-book series. I've published 6 books total, written 8 books, and I've worked with beta readers on every single one of those books. Except the first one I wrote, but I wrote that when I was like 13, and I published it when I was 16, and that's a whole other animal. Apparently I have short-term memory loss because I literally made a video 2 weeks ago talking about how I did not work with beta readers on the 4th book in my series. That is true. I've worked with beta readers on 6 out of the 8 books that I've written. Not the first one, and then also not the 4th book in the series. But I regret that. And I made a video a couple weeks ago on why I regret it. I have honed my process over the course of many years. I know that people say that I look like I'm 18. I'm 25. I just like wearing bright colors because they make me happy. I'm by no means an expert in working with beta readers, but I do have some experience. And these are the questions that I've found to be most useful for me when revising a book based on beta reader feedback. So take any of the questions that resonate with you, ignore me if you don't agree with my advice or don't want to follow it, and here are the questions. Question number 1, because I am apparently a glutton for punishment and I am also a bad news first kind of girl, were there any parts of the book that you found boring or made you want to put the book down? This one is pretty straightforward. I literally just want to know, as a reader, whether beta readers at any point felt that a certain section was dragging, or they were starting to get bored, or they were like, this is boring, I don't want to read this anymore, and wanted to put the book down. I find this a more helpful phrasing of the question instead of talking about how did you find the pacing? And I do ask about the pacing later, but just asking what parts were boring usually helps highlight sections that drag on a little bit, because I'm an overwriter. I write way too much in my drafts because I get way too excited and I just include so much detail that I have to cut my books down significantly now as part of like my general writing process. This has been the case with the past 4 books that I've written. I just write way too much and have to cut them down. So usually the book, when I send it to beta readers, is on the lengthier side, and I need to get feedback on parts that I might personally love, but everybody else is like, okay, you've described the ghost fighting tactics in detail for 4,000 words. I don't care, and I just want it in 500 words. I'm obsessed with every single detail of the story. My readers might not be. So this is a really great question that helps me highlight the sections that were typically boring. And as I mentioned in the other beta reading video that I made, it's super important to send your book out to multiple beta readers so you can compare feedback and answers to these questions. If you only sent it to one beta reader and they were like, this part was really boring, but you get no more feedback, and if you had sent it to 10 beta readers, maybe one beta reader was like, I found that boring, but 9 were like, I loved that part, it was so exciting, it helps contextualize the responses better. Question number 2. What were your favorite parts of the book? Which moments excited you, made you smile, or made this a good reading experience? What worked? Now it's time for some good news, and this question helps me highlight what it is about a project that is resonating with my target audience. Maybe it's not what resonates with me, even though I usually am smack dab in the middle of the target audience for the books that I'm writing. This helps me figure out what generally is working for everybody else, and those elements I can play up, or just it helps me highlight the heart of the book and the core of the story. Separate the things that are really working from the things that are not, or just to flag things that are working really well and I don't really have to worry about those because they're already working well and I don't have to touch those and I can fix the other problems with the manuscript. Number 3, was anything confusing or hard to follow? Were there moments that I lost you? This is Also a very helpful question for me because I tend to write books with a lot going on in them. But sometimes I'll get answers to this question where people will say that a character was trying to explain the world building, but it kind of went off the rails and it got confusing, or some parts were contradictory, or the beta reader will voice like what they think the world building is in the feedback, and I'll be like, ooh, that's not actually what I intended. So something is getting crossed there in my delivery of the world building. As a bonus sub question to this, if there is a very complicated world building system and something that I'm worried about not coming across right, I will ask the beta reader to put it in their words and like explain to me how the system works in like brief words so that I can see whether I did a good enough job trying to get that across, or if there's like a fundamental misunderstanding in multiple beta reader explanations, then I can go back and try to figure out, like that just kind of flags something as being wrong for me. Next question. Were there moments in the plot that didn't feel believable or made you suspend disbelief too much? This is always something I'm very worried about. I really try to keep my worlds very grounded, and I'm terrified of writing like worlds with major plot holes. I think this is probably a result of me publishing the book in high school that had a lot of plot holes in it, and now I have vowed to never do that again. So I really stress about trying to keep everything grounded and believable. I read a piece of writing advice once where like every writer gets one suspension of disbelief per book. And like the suspension of disbelief can be like, oh yeah, there are dragons in the world. But then you gotta make sure that your dragon system makes sense. Or in my case, like, yeah, there are ghosts. Ghosts are real. That's my one suspension of disbelief. But it's my job to make sure that the ghost world is real and solid and grounded and makes sense and has rules. Sometimes people will point out bigger plot things, but by the time that I send a book to beta readers, usually my world building kind of holds together somewhat, but sometimes I've had them point out things before in the world building that have made me reconsider a lot of stuff. Other times there'll be little things like, how did this character know that this person was going to do this? Or, you know, this person gave a magnet to a character or like in this scene, and then 2 scenes later pulls a magnet out of their pocket. Like little things like that that just pull you out of the world. Things like that will go under that question, and those are super helpful and good to go back and correct. Now I have my favorite question. How did each of the main characters change from beginning to end? I love asking beta readers this because my characters are probably the most important thing, or the thing I take most seriously when writing my books. All of my books are characters first. Even though a lot of them are pretty plot heavy, my characters are like the thing that I pay most attention to. And I like writing characters that change. Sometimes I have characters that don't change, but if I have characters that don't change, it's for a reason. And sometimes, like, you know, the reader's understanding of them will change, and there are other things that you can do with characters. But I like writing dynamic main characters because I find change very interesting to read about, and it makes them active and it keeps the narrative interesting to me. I get annoyed reading about characters that don't change, like when I'm reading a book for pleasure in my particular genre. Like if I'm reading more of a literary fiction commentary on something, or like kind of a more artsy book and the characters don't change for a reason, that's completely different. But I write genre fiction and just really love having characters that change. So I always ask my beta readers to explain to me how the characters changed, because sometimes I think I will be doing something to their character arc and it will be very clear to me, or a little subtle, but clear to me, and my beta readers will have absolutely no idea that that was going on. And they'll be like, this character didn't really change from beginning to end. Like they're still kind of the same person, and they can't put it into words. And so that's a red flag to me. And that is something that makes me want to go back and reconsider that character's role in the story and how they could change and just change their character arc. I love having beta readers explain things to me because it helps point out issues that I have in my delivery, because it's my job as the writer to make all of these things clear to the reader. And if it's not clear, and if they're not spitting out what I want to be putting into the book, then I know I've done something wrong. The next question is a little long, so I'm just gonna read it right from my computer. Were there any moments that made you fangirl or get emotional, or moments that made you want to throw the book across the room in a good or bad way? Where did you feel the most? Obviously, I want my books to have emotional impact. And if a beta reader comes back and is like, well, this book really didn't make me feel anything, then that's a problem. So in my ideal world, if I've done my job correctly, they will be listing moments in the book where I felt the most and which I wanted to have an intense emotional impact. But if I have a scene that I really wanted to have an intense emotional impact and nobody comments on it or lists it under this question, then I know I've done something wrong and I have to go revisit that scene and figure out why. It's not the beta reader's job to tell me objectively why they felt something about my book. It is only their job to tell me what they felt about the book, and then it's my job to go back and try to figure out from a craft perspective what I can do differently in order to achieve a different result. Like, obviously, sometimes they can suggest things that I could do differently, and that's really helpful, but I don't go to beta readers for craft feedback. I go to beta readers for reading reactions, and then I have to use my knowledge of the craft or work with an editor to try to better achieve the end result that I want. But that being said, I still do ask about pacing, because pacing is kind of a bit of a problem for me, and I tend to just get really excited about stuff that does not matter and will just ramble on about stuff that doesn't matter for long periods of time. And so I do ask a question, which is, how did you feel about the pacing of the story? Were there parts that dragged on or rushed by too quickly? Is there anything that you wish there was more of? This is kind of similar to the first two questions, like, is there anything that was boring, or like, what were your favorite parts of the book? But it's a slightly different question and sometimes brings slightly different answers. Like, people will say like, okay, the explanation of this went on for too long and that was a little bit boring. Or they'll be like, oh, I really wish we had more of this character, or I really wanted to know what happened to these two characters. So I ask it anyway, even though it is kind of a similar question to the first two, because as I said, sometimes people say different things in response to this one. Next question is, did you notice any plot holes or inconsistencies? This one is incredibly helpful, obviously. I don't think I have to do much to explain this question. It's pretty self-explanatory, but incredibly helpful. And I highly recommend asking your beta readers this, because I've gotten some really, really helpful insights from this question, and it has greatly helped me improve like my next drafts. Like, I make a giant mega list of every single response, and I go through and I check them when I do my revision after beta reading, and it always makes the book better, and it gets rid of some really silly errors. Thankfully, I haven't had to deal with anybody noticing plot holes that like undermine my entire book yet, but I'm sure that's coming. Mostly it's like kind of small stuff, but small stuff that like makes a difference. What could I change to make this a more enjoyable read? All the answers I get to this question are very subjective. I listen to the ones that I hear over multiple pieces of feedback. I ignore the ones that I only hear once, unless they really resonate with me, unless I'm like, oh yeah, that, like, they're onto something there, and I feel that in my gut and I want to do that. Sometimes people will be like, nothing, you are perfect, and I'll be like, you know, oh, thank you, I'm amazing, but then afterwards be like, I'm objectively not amazing. There has to be something that I have to change. Like, when I'm asking for beta reading, I really, really want people to be critical, because it's way nicer to get critical feedback of a book that you've sent to beta readers than it is to get critical feedback of a book that you've published. And so I just see beta reading as like, I know that this is like a steaming pile of garbage. I really love it. It's like my favorite garbage in the world. But I know that it's garbage, but I know that it doesn't have to always be garbage. So I just want to like figure out how to make it not garbage, and just being like, I've totally lost this metaphor, but you get my point. The next question, and this is also a super important one for me, is how did you feel when you reached the end of the book? Did you want more from the story, or were you done? This can be a frustrating one if everybody is like, no, I was done, but they can't tell you why. This can make me want to drive my head into the wall, but it's really important to know, because what I want to do with my books is I want people to want more of the story. To try and soften the blow of me wanting to pummel the wall with my head, I usually ask the follow-up question of, like, if applicable, if you were done, why, and what could have been done differently to make you want more? Just because it gives me a little bit of guidance. Like, if they were like, the mystery wasn't that compelling, and then they leave it at that, I can email them and be like, what about the mystery wasn't compelling? Just try to get some specifics, and then I can see if those come up in multiple pieces of feedback, and then I can try to make a plan for how I can make the mystery more compelling. I do like asking people to try to self-diagnose that question, just because there are so many different reasons it could be for, and I just want to get an idea of why they said what they said. And finally, the last thing I'll ask is, do you have any feedback not covered in these questions? A lot of people usually say no, or they'll just say like, I'm so excited, like, you know, thanks for letting me beta read, which is super nice. And that is it for my standard list of questions. So not covered in this list, because these questions change between every single manuscript I send out for beta reading, I ask questions about my personal insecurity points for every manuscript. So if I'm writing a book and I'm worried that like it's too depressing and there's not enough humor in it, I will literally ask like, was this book too depressing? Like, do I need to have more humor? Or if I'm really concerned about killing off a favorite character, like a fan favorite character, and I'm worried what the reaction will be, I'll be like, so I did a thing, what do you think? And then people will tell me what they thought, and then I can, if everybody's outraged, then maybe I can either reconsider or think about framing it in a different way. If they're outraged because they were like, I loved the character, but it was a really strong emotional moment, that's fine. But if they're outraged because they were like, this just made me so mad because of all of these reasons that are completely valid, then I have to reframe the death of the character or even reconsider maybe not killing them. I'll ask about like whether there are too many scenes between two characters, whether there was enough of these other characters, what people thought of this subplot that I was worried about, things like that, so I can gauge whether I'm telling myself narratives about a particular piece of writing that are just not actually true and not based in fact, and I'm telling myself lies to make myself feel insecure, or my insecurities have legs and I should probably do something about them. It helps me gauge that when I am able to ask other people their opinions. So put all of these questions in a Google Doc and link that in the description of this video. So I probably could have, I can honestly just like copy and paste the questions into the description of the video. That would probably be easier. Maybe I'll just do that. But I put the questions in the description one way or another. So if you want to use these if like you're sending a book off to beta readers, feel free to go take them from the description and use them, or obviously change them and edit them as like it will fit you and your style in your book. I never send the same questions to beta readers for every single project. I always tweak them based on what the book is and like what my problems with it are and what my insecurities are. So I use like this as a general base and then I'll like change it based on what the book is. But yeah, that is my video about the questions that I send to beta readers. I hope that it was helpful. If it was, I'd be super grateful if you could take a second and like this video and also subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze and I'm an award-winning author who makes videos sharing actionable writing tips that helps me make my own writing better. I am the author of the 5-book paranormal thriller They Stay series, which is now a complete series, which is super exciting. I just published the last book last week, and I got a bunch of other things that I'm working on right now. This is the rest of this year is going to be a huge content creation year for me. I am still really trying to write at least 3 books this year, and we're gonna see how that goes. I'm already like 55 to 60,000 words into draft 1 of one of those books. So, and that just kind of came together in the past month. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to bang out these drafts and like edit them and kind of get them to a place where I'm happy with them so I can release that many books next year, but we will see. I don't know, I'm excited about it, but I'm excited to be entering the content creation phase of my process. I spent like the first part of this year just really smack dab in the editing phase, and that was very stressful. And the editing phase is scary because you're about to publish a book and you have to deal with all the insecurities that come from that. And I don't know, I love the playful part of writing where you're just like experimenting with new ideas and trying things and playing around with it and trying to understand the characters and see what works. So that is very fun, and that's kind of where I'm at right now and where I'm probably going to be at for the rest of the year. So I'm super psyched about this year, but next year is going to be crazy and absolutely insane if I'm going to be releasing 3 to 4 books and also be getting married the same year. That's crazy, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it works out. I hope you have a fantastic week, everybody. And as always, happy writing.